Evening settles softly over my little porch. The warm cup of tea rests heavy in my hands, steam curling up like memories drifting through my mind. I sit here, watching my weathered hands, hands that built so much, and suddenly I'm back, decades ago, a boy full of dreams and rough-edged hope. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, where the smell of fresh-cut wood mingled with the earth after rain, and the sound of hammer on nail was like a heartbeat in our neighborhood. My father was a carpenter, a man of steady hands and quiet pride. From him, I learned that work wasn't just about earning a living. It was about creating something that lasts. School wasn't easy for me. Books felt heavy, but my hands knew their language. By the time I was 14, I was already helping Dad on the weekends, learning to measure twice and cut once, feeling the grain of the wood beneath my fingertips. The sun would beat down, sweat trickling, the scent of sawdust thick in the air. It was hard, honest work. Those early days taught me patience, respect for the craft, and the value of a day's labor. There was something sacred about shaping raw materials into homes and buildings where families would laugh, love, and grow. I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself. But those times were simple. The world around us was changing fast, highways stretching, cities rising, and I was ready to be part of that change. Yet in those moments, I never imagined how much life would throw my way, the challenges I'd face, or the people who would shape my journey. For now, on this quiet porch, I hold those memories close, the beginning of a life built with calloused hands and a hopeful heart. After finishing school, I didn't want to waste time sitting in a classroom where my mind drifted elsewhere. The day I got my apprenticeship at a local construction company, I felt like the world had opened a door just for me. I was eager, hungry to learn every tool, every technique, every secret that turned raw materials into something solid and lasting. Morning started before dawn, with the crisp chill of early fall biting at my skin. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with engine grease and wet concrete dust as trucks rumbled in. I remember the sound of boots hitting gravel, the sharp clang of steel beams being set in place, the rhythmic pounding of jackhammers breaking through stubborn asphalt. My mentor, Joe, was a tough but fair man. He didn't have much patience for excuses, but he believed in teaching by example. Respect the craft, kid. One careless cut can ruin the whole beam. I watched him with awe, how his hands moved with precision, how he seemed to understand the materials almost like old friends. Days were long, muscles ached in ways I hadn't known before, and sometimes the cold seeped through my clothes until I thought my bones would freeze. But I loved it. I loved the feeling of building something real, something that mattered. I learned to read blueprints like a map, to work with bricks, steel, wood, and concrete, to bring plans to life. During breaks, we'd gather on the tailgate of a truck, sharing stories and jokes, the camaraderie as much a part of the job as the work itself. We were a band of brothers, all sweating and striving toward the same goal. I felt proud of my hands, proud of my work, proud of the future I was shaping. Yet beneath the surface, there was a quiet fear of making mistakes, of not being good enough, of what the future held as the world outside kept spinning faster. But for now, those fears stayed buried beneath the dust and noise of the building site. The dream was alive, and I was ready to chase it. My first real job as a full-time builder was when I was just 19. It was a modest project, a small row of houses on the edge of town, but to me, it felt like the world's biggest opportunity. The sun was harsh that summer, baking the dirt and making every sweat bead feel heavier than the last. I remember the smell of fresh lumber stacked in neat piles, the sharp tang of nails and tar, and the dust rising in the golden afternoon light. Every day was a battle, against exhaustion, against deadlines, against the ache deep in my back and hands. But also it was a dance, a rhythm of hammer strikes, saw blades spinning, and the camaraderie of men who relied on each other for safety and success. One morning, early in the project, I made a mistake, a misread measurement that set a whole wall crooked. Joe, my mentor, found out, and I was terrified. But instead of yelling, he pulled me aside and said, "Son, building isn't about never messing up. It's about fixing what you break and learning fast." That moment stuck with me. It wasn't about perfection, but responsibility. We tore down the crooked wall and rebuilt it, stronger and straighter. The smell of fresh-cut wood, the scratch of sawdust on skin, the thud of nails, all became part of a lesson in resilience. Work was grueling, sometimes dangerous. I learned to respect the weight of a steel beam, the unforgiving bite of a circular saw, and the sting of blisters that no amount of ointment could soothe. But I also learned about pride in seeing a foundation laid right, walls rising true, and a house slowly becoming a home. And amid it all, there was the human side. Friendships forged over shared lunches, laughter echoing at quitting time. The quiet support when a man's back gave out or when life outside the site hit hard. That first job taught me more than building. It taught me about life itself. By my mid-20s, I was restless. The small town I grew up in felt like a cage. Stories of booming cities and towering skyscrapers pulled me away. I packed my few belongings into my old truck and drove east, chasing work and opportunity. The city was a different world. Its sharp smells of diesel, fresh concrete, and the city heat wrapped around me like a thick blanket. The noise never stopped. Jackhammers pounding, cranes groaning, and the distant wail of sirens. The rhythm was faster, harsher, but it carried a strange kind of promise. I landed a job on a big commercial build, a high-rise office tower that seemed to reach the clouds. The work was tougher, more complex. The crews were larger, more specialized. I learned new skills, welding steel beams high above the streets, working with blueprints that looked more like art than simple plans, coordinating with electricians and plumbers. Every morning, standing on scaffolding with the city sprawling beneath me, I felt alive and terrified. The wind whipped past, and the height made my heart pound. Yet I trusted my hands, my training, and my crew. We moved like a machine, each part relying on the other for safety and success. But city life had its price. I missed the quiet nights back home, the smell of pine in the air, the easy smiles of neighbors who knew your name. I lived in cramped apartments with noisy neighbors, faced long commutes, and sometimes the loneliness was like a cold draft that no jacket could block. Still, I pushed forward. I was building more than buildings. I was building a life, a future for the family I dreamed of having. And though I didn't yet know how it would unfold, I held tight to the hope that every nail I hammered brought me closer to something real and lasting. Her name was Ellen. I met her on a job in Baltimore. She wasn't a builder. She worked at the little diner across the street from the site, where we'd go in the mornings for black coffee and greasy eggs before the shift. She wore her hair tied back in a red bandana, and her smile,
God, that smile, cut through the gray of concrete and steel like a shaft of sun. I sat at the counter every morning just to hear her laugh. She started remembering my order, then my name, then the way I liked my toast. One morning she slid my plate across and said, "You work with your hands, don't you?" I nodded. She took my calloused fingers in hers and whispered, "They feel like someone who builds more than walls." We started seeing each other after work. Walks along the water, her hand in mine, the city fading behind us like background noise. She made my apartment feel like a home. A little candle here, a plant there, the scent of her lavender shampoo lingering on my pillows.
Life was still tough. The hours were long and the money was tight, but for the first time, I had something to come home to. She'd run me a warm bath after hard days, press her palm against my sore back, and tell me, "You make things solid in a world that keeps changing." I remember one night we lay on the roof of our apartment watching the stars. She asked if I'd ever thought about building a house, not for someone else, but for us. A place with a porch, a small garden, maybe even a dog. I told her yes. I had thought about it every damn day since I first held a hammer. That dream became the center of everything I worked for. Love gave the work weight, and I worked harder. Not for the paychecks, not for the reputation, but for the life we could raise together, brick by brick. Those were the sweetest days. And though life would take its turns, I still remember the smell of her morning coffee, the creak of floorboards when she danced barefoot in the kitchen, and the feeling that just maybe I was building something that would never crumble. We bought a little plot just outside of town. Nothing fancy, just a piece of land with a crooked fence and a tree that leaned like it was tired of standing. But to us, it was everything. I still remember the smell of the earth when we broke ground. Damp, rich, full of promise. Ellen stood barefoot in the grass, holding blueprints I'd sketched out by hand. It wasn't just a job this time. Every nail I drove, every wall I raised, every beam I leveled carried a piece of my heart. I built it slow, on weekends, after long shifts, with borrowed tools and a radio that played old rock ballads through static. Ellen would sit on an overturned bucket reading books or bringing lemonade when the sun got too heavy. Sometimes she'd hum a tune from the kitchen while I worked on the framing, and the sound would carry through the rafters like a blessing. We didn't have much money, so everything was done by hand. I laid the flooring myself, every plank measured, sanded, nailed in with care. The porch was her idea. She said she wanted a place where we could grow old, drink tea, and watch the seasons roll by. I didn't tell her then, but I built that porch with extra reinforcement beneath the boards, like it might need to hold our whole lives together someday. When it was done, we stood in the doorway together, arm in arm, the setting sun pouring gold across the living room walls. She cried. I did too, though I pretended it was sawdust. That first night, we slept on a mattress on the floor. No furniture yet, just us, and the creaks and sighs of a house newly alive. Rain tapped the roof, and she whispered, "You built this. You made this real." And for the first time in my life, I didn't just feel like a builder. I felt like a man who had finally come home. Life sped up after that. One moment we were painting nursery walls a soft shade of yellow, and the next we were tripping over toy trucks and stepping on Lego bricks barefoot in the dark. Our firstborn Michael came on a chilly November morning. I remember pacing the hospital hallway in boots, still caked with drywall dust, holding a bouquet that looked pathetic compared to what she deserved. When the nurse placed him in my arms, his tiny fingers curled around mine, a builder's hand meeting a new beginning. Then came Grace, 3 years later, all curls and stubbornness. She'd watch me in the garage as I fixed broken chairs or sanded down tabletops, her eyes wide with wonder. "Daddy, can I help?" she'd ask, already reaching for a hammer twice her size. Those were full years, long days on the job site, and longer nights up with sick kids or patching the roof when the storms rolled in. Ellen worked too, part-time at the school, then at a bookstore once the kids got older. We didn't have vacations or fancy dinners, but we had late-night pancakes, backyard campouts, and dance parties in the living room that shook the light fixtures. I brought work home more than I should have. I'd come through the door with sore muscles and a short fuse. Ellen knew when to talk and when to just slide a plate across the table and let silence do its work. God, she was patient. She saw the wear in my bones before I did.
Still, I built things. I built tree houses, kitchen shelves, and a swing set that leaned just slightly to the left but never once gave way. I built with love, not blueprints. I fixed broken steps, mended broken hearts, and learned how to say, "I'm sorry," in the language of action, in warm breakfasts and patched jeans and long drives to college drop-offs. Sometimes I'd catch myself looking at my kids, strong, kind, dreaming big, and wonder how something so fragile as time turned into something this solid. Like the homes I built, they stood taller each year, and I stood back, amazed. I used to think the hardest part of life was carrying bricks up a ladder in summer heat, but I was wrong. The hardest part is watching change come in quiet ways. The way your daughter stops asking for bedtime stories. The way your wife's hair turns silver one strand at a time. The way your knees ache going downstairs that you built yourself. The work began to wear on me in my 40s. The weight of years pressed heavier than any load-bearing wall. My back would seize up on cold mornings. My hands, once steady and sharp, began to tremble just slightly. Not enough to stop the work, but enough to notice. Still, I pushed through. I was the kind of man who didn't quit. You work until the work is done. That's what my father taught me. But the job site started to change. The old crews broke apart. Some retired, some moved away. A few never made it past 50. New guys came in with their phones and power tools I barely recognized. The rhythm was faster now, more clinical. They had apps for blueprints, digital levels, laser lines. One kid, maybe 20, asked me why I still used a wooden folding rule instead of an app on my phone. I just smiled. You don't explain craftsmanship to someone still learning how to hold a hammer. It wasn't bitterness, just a sense of time slipping. The world was moving on, and I wasn't sure I wanted to keep up. At home, Ellen started leaving sticky notes around the house. Reminders for me to call the doctor, to take it easy, to rest. I'd toss them out at first. I didn't want to admit I was slowing down. But one day, I caught her watching me tie my boots, hands struggling with laces, and her eyes, God, they were filled with so much love and worry, it nearly knocked the wind out of me. That night, I sat on the porch, same as I do now, and stared at those hands of mine. Cracked, scarred, but still strong. I wasn't done yet, but I knew the ground beneath me had started to shift. And for the first time, I wondered what life looked like when the building was done. It came quietly, the decision. No big moment, no dramatic speech. Just one morning, as I loaded my tools into the truck, I looked at them and thought, maybe I don't have to carry this weight anymore. The company had offered me a management position the year before, office work, less grit, more paperwork. I turned it down. That wasn't who I was. I wanted to smell the cedar, feel the grain, wipe the sweat from my brow standing under the open sky, not stare at spreadsheets through tinted windows. But one day, a friend from the crew, Jimmy, a wiry guy with a busted shoulder and a laugh like gravel, said, "Let's build one last thing together, something for the town." It was a community center, nothing fancy, a gym, couple of classrooms, a place for kids and the elderly to come and feel safe. We worked weekends, volunteered hours after our shifts. The town pitched in, some with labor, some with donations. It reminded me of the old days, when neighbors helped neighbors raise barns, when there was pride in the dirt under your nails. I led the framing. My back groaned, knees barked, but my heart beat steady. Ellen packed me lunches like she used to. Some days Grace brought her own son, my grandson, to watch us work. He'd sit in the grass, legs crossed, toy hammer in hand, eyes wide.
That building went up slow, but it went up right. Every nail driven, every board placed, had a story behind it. My story, my town's, my crew's. When it opened, they asked me to say a few words. I stood there, rough hands gripping the podium, sweat-stained cap in hand, and I looked out at the people, my people, and I said, I've built homes, offices, bridges, but this is different. This one is made of heart. And in that moment, I knew. I'd just built my last project. Not because I was too old, but because I was finally full, complete. It wasn't the end of a career, it was the closing chapter of a long, beautiful, honest life of work. The day they threw the retirement party, I almost didn't show up. Something about it made me uneasy. The idea of people clapping for me while I stood there with nothing in my hands. No hammer, no tape measure, just me. But Ellen wouldn't let me skip it. She ironed my best shirt, the one with the little tear near the shoulder I never bothered to fix, said it gave me character. She brushed the dust off my old boots and whispered, "Let them celebrate what you gave, not what you're leaving behind." It was held at the community center we'd built. Poetic, I guess. The place was packed. Old crew guys, their kids, even a few clients from years ago. Families I'd built homes for, now grayer, heavier, happier. Jimmy stood up and told the story of the time I saved a foundation pour from collapse by using nothing but fence posts and instinct. Someone else mentioned how I used to show up at job sites early just to shovel snow off the walkways, so no one would bust their tail. They gave me a plaque, polished wood with my name etched in brass, for building more than structures, for building lives. That one got me. Grace came up and hugged me long, her voice muffled against my chest. "Dad, you were never just building buildings. You were building the world around us." Michael, usually the quiet one, told a story about how he used to measure his worth by how long he could hold a flashlight steady while I worked in the crawl space. "Turns out," he said, "Dad wasn't just building homes. He was building men." Ellen stood in the back, hand over her mouth, eyes shimmering. I didn't say much, just stood there, heart pounding like the beat of an old nail gun, and said, "I was lucky. Lucky to have work that mattered. Lucky to do it with people I respect. Lucky to build something solid in a world that sometimes feels like it's falling apart." And then, like I'd done 1,000 times before, I put my hand on the doorframe on my way out, just to feel the weight of what we'd made, and stepped into the evening light. No tools, no blueprints, just my hands, still strong, and the quiet, lasting joy of a man who spent a lifetime building more than he ever dreamed. Retirement didn't come with a parade, it came with silence. The first Monday I didn't have to wake up before dawn, I still did, out of habit. I sat at the kitchen table in the half-light, the house still asleep, listening to the ticking of the old wall clock, the same one that used to count down the minutes before I'd lace up my boots and head out. Only now, there was nowhere to go. I tried staying busy, fixed the loose stair tread, realigned the shed door, oiled the squeaky hinge in the pantry, but those were small jobs, over in a flash. The kind of work that doesn't fill your bones or leave your shirt damp with effort. I missed the weight of the hammer in my hand, missed the language of blueprints, the smell of sawdust,
the camaraderie of men who knew when to talk and when to just nod across a crowded worksite. Some days I'd drive past old builds, neighborhoods I'd helped raise, roofs I'd framed by hand. I'd park down the block, engine ticking as it cooled, and just sit, watching kids ride bikes on sidewalks I'd poured, watching families laugh on decks I'd fastened one nail at a time. It gave me peace, and sometimes something sharper, a twist in the gut, a longing not just for the work, but for who I was when I did it. Ellen noticed. Of course she did. She always could read the quiet in me. One afternoon, she found me sitting in the garage, staring at my old tool belt. She knelt beside me, rested her hand on mine, and said, "You don't have to keep building, love. You already did. Look around. It's all still standing." That night, we sat on the porch, sipping tea, wrapped in the same quilt she made back when we had nothing but dreams and 2 folding chairs. The wind rustled the trees, and I realized the world still needed me, just differently now. Not to build walls, but to hold the memories steady. It was a Saturday afternoon, late summer. The kind of day where the sun hangs heavy in the sky, and time feels like it's leaning back in a rocking chair. I was sorting through old boxes in the attic, mostly looking for something to do, when I found the letter. It wasn't an old one. It was unwritten. Just a clean folded sheet of paper and a pen, sitting on top of my father's wooden level. Something about the quiet up there made me sit cross-legged on the floor, like I used to as a boy, and begin to write. Not to Ellen, not to Grace or Michael, but to my grandson, little Henry, who still had the softness of childhood in his cheeks and the spark of mischief in his eyes. I wrote about the feeling of holding a hammer for the first time, about the sound of joists settling at dusk, about how sometimes the most important thing you build isn't made of wood or nails. I told him that the world might tell him to chase more money, more screens, more speed, but that he should never be afraid of slowness, of working with his hands, of being someone people can count on. And then I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and left it in his toy toolbox for him to find when he was ready. A week later, I was sitting on the porch again. Same tea, same breeze, when the phone rang. It was Henry. He didn't say much at first, just breathed on the other end. Then, in the voice of a boy trying hard not to cry, he said, "Grandpa, I didn't know you built all that." We talked for hours. He asked about cranes and bricks, about my first hammer, about whether I ever built a secret room. I had, under a staircase, just once for a family who needed somewhere to hide Christmas presents. But then he got quiet, and he asked, "Were you ever scared?" I told him yes, all the time, but I kept building anyway, because sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just a man showing up day after day and doing the work. That night, after I hung up, I stood in my hallway, hand on the frame I'd built years ago, and smiled. The letter had done its job, and maybe, just maybe I'd started building something new, something that would outlast even wood and stone. The seasons rolled on, slow and steady, like the turn of a well-oiled wheel. I took more walks now, not fast, not far, but purposeful. My boots still fit, still creaked the same, though the legs inside them didn't carry quite the same fire.
One crisp autumn morning, I wandered down to the shed out back, the one I'd built with leftover planks from our first porch. The door still stuck the same way it always had. Inside, the smell hit me instantly. Old pine, motor oil, dust warmed by sun through the window pane. My hands found the old workbench like they never left.
There were shavings still in the corner, curled like little wood memories. I ran my fingers across the surface, each nick and dent a story. That one from when Grace asked for a dollhouse. That one when Michael broke a bat and we tried to fix it together. That burn mark from setting down a soldering iron in a hurry, mid-project, mid-laughter. I didn't cry, but something in me softened. It's strange how a man can build for decades, chase the skyline, pour his energy into foundations and frames, and in the end, the things that remain aren't always the buildings. They're the echoes. The scrape of a chair on a wooden floor you installed with your own hands. The way your wife still runs her fingers along the banister you carved. The quiet awe in your grandson's voice when he says, "You made this?" They live in the grain, in the hum of a heater you fixed one bitter winter, in the porch swing that still groans just the same after all these years. I stayed in that shed for hours, not building, just remembering. And as the light shifted and the wind picked up, I whispered to no one in particular, "Thank you." Not for the jobs, not for the paychecks, but for the chance to build a life where the smallest things turned out to mean the most. The storm came in fast that night, the kind of wind that sounds like it's trying to pull the house off its foundations, the kind of rain that taps hard against the windows like it wants in. Ellen was already asleep, curled under that old quilt she stitched when the kids were small, but I couldn't settle. Something pulled at me. So I stepped out onto the porch, the same porch I built 40 years ago, with hands stronger than they are now, but no more certain. The boards creaked under my feet, but held, like always. Lightning cracked across the sky, and for a moment everything lit up, the yard, the trees, the distant silhouette of the shed. Then darkness again, thick and humming. I stood there, hand on the column, watching the storm rage, and it hit me how many storms this porch had seen. It stood through blizzards and heat waves, birthdays and breakups, summer meals and winter silences. It held us, our fights, our laughter, our kids' first steps, our quiet reconciliations. And now it held me, alone in the dark, heart full. I thought of the men I worked with, some long gone, some just ghosts of memory. I thought of the buildings now standing in towns I haven't seen in decades. I thought of Henry, maybe sleeping, maybe dreaming of wood and nails and things that don't come from screens. And I thought of Ellen, who believed in me when I had nothing but bruised hands and borrowed dreams. The wind shifted, softer now, like even the storm knew to take a breath. I sat in my old chair, the one with the cracked armrest, and looked out into the night. I didn't feel fear, I didn't feel regret, just the deep, steady calm of a man whose porch still stands, and whose life, in all its mess and meaning, was built to last.
Now, as I sit here on this porch, tea cooling in my hands, I look out at the world I helped shape. Not just the houses and walls, but the lives and memories held within them. 65 years have carved their story into my skin, but also into the timber and stone that surround me. The scent of cedar, the warmth of sun on weathered wood, the gentle creak of a floorboard underfoot. These are the echoes of a life well built. I think about the boy who first gripped a hammer, trembling with excitement and uncertainty. The man who built homes with sweat and pride, who carried dreams heavier than any load. The husband who found love in a diner and built a home with his heart. The father who raised children between bricks and bedtime stories. The grandfather who passes on more than tools, a legacy of resilience, care, and purpose. Yes, there were struggles, the aches that come with time, the quiet moments of doubt, the fear of fading away unnoticed. But in the end, it all shaped me, just as I shaped the world around me.
And when the evening wind stirs the leaves and the porch light flickers softly, I know I am exactly where I'm meant to be. A builder, not just of structures, but of a life that mattered. And for that, I am grateful beyond words. Thank you for walking this journey with me.